have a wrong strategy. I always trying to make this like a single flow, the stream of consciousness without edits, and it never works, and I'm making thousands of edits. Anyway, hello everybody. Last week you saw me unbox the Sensah ARX 13-speed mountain grade group set bundle from AliExpress, which was comprised of this derailleur, this chain, this cassette. The derailleur is Sensah ARX, the shifter, which you don't see, is a Sensah ARX as well. This is Sugek 11 to 52 cassette, and quite possibly fake KMC X12 chain. Now, you saw me unbox this, and I promised you I'm going to install this on my cross-country bike, except I didn't because I'm a liar, and the rest of the story is going to be next in this video. Anyway, what you saw last week actually happened 3 or so weeks prior to this day, which I'm recording this one, and I'm obviously hoping I'm going to release this video today, even though that's not going to happen. Anyway, that happened 3 weeks ago, and since then I rode the entire drivetrain for about 5 hours or 100 kilometers, and I have some observations which I'm going to share with you, well, in this video, obviously. Anyway, as you can see, I am an aspiring tyrant of all the universes, and since that involves talking to people and not rambling about without purpose, although if I was a tyrant I would do that totally. Anyway, I made some notes, so I'm going to be scratching things I want to talk about. Anyway, installation. Now, my initial plan was to install this to my cross-country bike, which is there. Unfortunately, because of a weird incompatibility between Novatec rear hub on my cross-country and the Sugek cassette, I wasn't able to do it. Even though the cassette did fit on the X-Cobra hub I have on my road bike, I'm not going to be, well, committing a desecration of a road bike with something like this. So I ended up ordering Shimano RS470 rear hub. This hub has interesting property that it has a very low flanges, so there would be maximum amount of clearance for the cassette, and that turned out to be the case. So as you can see, everything works perfectly, even though the wheel is a touch weaker because previously I had the same hub on this particular bike. Even though the cassette fits, it's unfortunately very close to the spokes. There's like, I don't know, 0.5 millimeter of clearance, which is kind of concerning. The installation of the derailleur was actually pretty straightforward. The problem I had with the XRX, which was the weird range of adjustment of the B distance, isn't on this particular derailleur, and this kind of makes me think that I should have kept that derailleur and see what are the differences between those two generations, because this thing is essentially almost identical to the XRX, but this one actually works. Anyway, there is no issue with the setting of the B distance, so that's a good thing, and that's a progress from the previous generation. Now, come to think of it, if I had the XRX, I could, for example, come to a realization that I was pretty dumb and I wasn't able to adjust the derailleur correctly, because if those two things were identical, well, guess who's stupid now? Anyway, I can't compare, so I'm going to go with the I'm never wrong, and this is better than the previous generation. As with XRX, the cable routing of the derailleur cable is actually pretty smart, because the cable enters from here, it's routed back on the back side of the derailleur and goes up from this direction, which means that this end is never going to get fried by the cassette or anything, well, drivetrain related, which can happen on Shimano drivetrains. Once again, the good thing that was also present on the XRX. The initial adjustment was pretty straightforward. The B distance from the largest cog to the guide pulley doesn't need to be as excessive as on Shimano drivetrains, and generally speaking, it works pretty well. The distance from the spoke to the edge of the cage is also awfully close, and considering the caliber of this bike, it's, as you can imagine, kind of concerning. Once you install everything and play with the shifter, you will notice that everything seems a little bit plasticky, a little bit It's difficult to say, but in comparison to a well-adjusted Shimano drivetrain or SRAM drivetrain, the lever seems spongy. Now, the thing is that the haptic response, the moment when the gear changes, is clearly transferred through the entire the cable, through the entire driveline, so you know when you shifted a gear. So it's just a little bit cosmetic, really, but as a professional reviewer would say, there is no positive response. It's not like you are clicking and it's almost discrete in a way. You kind of feel that you are tensioning a spring somewhere, whether that is the lever or something in the derailleur or something in the cable, I don't know. It's clearly felt, and it's not something I experienced, for example, on a well-tuned Shimano drivetrain, even of the lower level, even though the 11 and 12 speed with the massive cassettes are not as positive as previous Shimano drivetrains. Unlike the XRX, which was problematic from the start, this thing works very, very, very well. One click on the shifter, one gear has changed. It very rarely misses a shift. There is a little bit of hysteresis when you're shifting on the largest cogs. It's a situation when if you shift, for example, on 40, which is the third largest from the 52, so 52, 36, 40. If you're going from the side of the big cogs, it's going to rub a little bit, but if you're going from the side of the smaller cogs, it shifts perfectly. I call it hysteresis, and it's usually a problem with either the cable, the tension in the cable, or tension in the housing, or something from manufacturing tolerances of the derailleur. And there is a little bit of this precisely on the 40 and 36 cogs. I don't know whether this is a case of this bike, because since I'm riding really large bicycles, there I have a lot of what's the word? I have a lot of housing and a lot of cable to stretch, so that's kind of a problem. And I used this isn't a solid noodle, this is a springy noodle, so that might be related to the problem I'm having. But it's not noticeable in practice. It just is there, and it happens, or may happen, may not happen. Doesn't really impact the performance. It's not like it's worse than your average Shimano drivetrain after a month or two of riding. As you can imagine, since this is 12 speed that was expanded by a single cog, whence came the problem with the cassette being very close to the spokes and the derailleur being close to the spoke as well. Initially using the two largest cogs, so 46 and 52, was accompanied by noises that I could only describe as disconcerting. Point being is that there was a lot of clicking, a lot of rubbing, a lot of, I don't know how to, it was just awful. And thankfully, after 100 or so kilometers, everything broke in, everything seems to work well. But even though riding on the three largest cogs is, well, it's not really nice. You feel that the chain is really stretched, it's really offset from the neutral chain line, and what can I say? Not something I would consider to be beneficial for this drivetrain. Now, 12 speed is already bad in this aspect, as you can imagine. 13 speed, which is even wider, even worse. What in the end is going to make me take this off this bike, unless I'm going to find a solution for this, is the fact that this cassette is weighing 750 grams and this derailleur has no clutch. And since this bike is kinda rowdy in nature, it makes the problem worse. And what I'm talking about, all the Shimano lower-end cassettes and SRAM lower-end cassettes, and most of the Chinese ones, have the largest cogs, like this VG Sports 12-speed 1150, have the largest cogs mounted on an aluminum spider, and the cogs are made of steel. What this essentially is a flywheel, and if you're riding somewhat fast and the cassette is spinning rapidly, when you want to stop pedaling, the cassette says, no, not really. Now the only thing that's stopping it is this spring in the pivot of the derailleur and the clutch. Now this spring can't be infinitely strong, and even if it was infinitely strong, the nature of the spring is that once it's tensioned, it wants to oscillate. So in reality, the only thing that stops this from happening is the clutch. What happens when a derailleur doesn't have a clutch? Well, what happens is that when the suspension is compressing, or when you're spinning the pedals pretty rapidly, you can be struck with the chain, for example, being flailed like this of the chainring. And I'm going to show you what happened to me on my way to work just the other day. Chain, stairs, chainring. Or, for example, it can get jammed. Now, let me present this. You can see. Let us spin this kind of fast. As you can see, we have this jammed. The problem gets even worse for full suspension bikes because of something called chain growth. Now, it doesn't mean that the chain is actually growing. It means that the distance from the bottom bracket through the rear wheel is increasing as the suspension gets compressed. This is true for just about every full suspension bike out there. The ratio of the increase is differing depending on the suspension characteristics, but it's there on just about every bike out there, and is the reason why the device such as O-chain or neutral gears exist. Anyway, when it happens, and since you are most likely on the bike and keeping the cranks from rotating with your body mass, in order to compensate, the rear wheel gets pulled by the chain, and this causes a jolt that causes the cassette to spin with everything. And once again, the only thing that can keep the drivetrain in some sort of stable state, like this one, instead of like this one, is the clutch and the spring. No clutch, no tension, no nothing, and you get chain flailed off the narrow wide ring. But I'm guessing you didn't come here to listen to me whine about drivetrains, so let's check how Sensah ARX with SUGEC 13-speed cassette performs well on the stand in this particular case. Someone in the comments in the previous video asked me to do this slowly, so let's start with doing it slowly. And by the way, the setup is, as you might expect, Sensah ARX, SUGEC 13-speed cassette, KMC most likely fake 12-speed X12 chain, and Sensah 13-speed shifter. And in the front we have Fovno Phantom crankset with a fake bolt because the original broke and I had to replace it, and 38 tooth 6mm offset chainring, which I think is Z-Race? Racework, sorry, it's a Racework. Let's go. You can hear the hysteresis on these two because it's almost non-existing when you're actually riding the thing. I'm actually going to reduce the cable tension a bit. And it's gone. Let's reduce the chain with the cable tension a little bit more. And now let's do this quickly. So, like you would when you're actually riding. And it appears I lessened the cable tension too much. Once again. And of course, after I've been telling everyone it works, it stopped. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 12, 13. Alright, as you can see it kind of works, but it's not brilliant. Now, let's check the backpedaling. So, 38, 52, no go. 38, 46, almost immediately. Come on. Never mind. 38, 40, almost immediately. On 36, we have it happen after a certain period, and on the 30, it finally works. As you can see, this is dramatically bad. And why does it do me? Oh, now we can see the hysteresis. Now it works. It works, but it doesn't. It's not really noticeable when you ride a bike, but it speaks volumes about the quality. I guess I could probably find some Goldilocks setting or replace this springy brake noodle with a fixed one, which should reduce the hysteresis, but this is the evidence that it's not as good as I would like it to be. Anyway, let's check this with Alto derailleur, and we'll see if the pull ratio is the same as Shimano 12-speed. So, I installed Alto ARX derailleur, adjusted it, and we'll see whether it's compatible with Sensah ARX. So far so good. However, the shifting becomes a bit erratic the further up the block you're going. And unfortunately, even if you force the 12th shift, the 13th is simply not going to work. I clicked the shifter and that's no go. The difference in ratio is actually pretty slight. If I adjust it to work on the 13th cog, so now I'm going to click it and I should get a clean shift. Or as clean as I can get. When we're going down, the shifting becomes completely erratic. The difference in ratio is actually pretty slight, but it's significant enough to make this compatibility simply not happening, which actually has kind of, well, far-reaching consequences, because it means that this derailleur isn't compatible with Shimano ecosystem, so I can't just drop a Dior here and be happy with a clutch. I need to use this product. And it means that the Sensah 1-to-1 ratio is either their own invention, or, as all signs on the sky are showing for us, it's most likely the exact thing as the exact actuation from SRAM, which is compatible with their road stuff. Because on AliExpress you can buy this derailleur branded as XRX, but I'm guessing it's simply the same thing but just different branding, with Sensah Empire shifters, the road stuff from Sensah, and apparently it works. So Theoretically, you could use this derailleur with a 12-speed or 11-speed Sensah Empire and get 12-speed or 11-speed gravel-oriented drivetrain, or, well, gravel-oriented drivetrain really. And if Sensah released 13-speed version of the Empire, you could get 13-speed, well, equivalent of Campagnolo OE car. Anyway, let's install this back, and I think I need to try something to address this hysteresis. So here we are again. I have reinstalled everything. I put a new cable, I put a new housing in order to test whether this springy noodle I was using before to route the cable to the derailleur was the problem with the shifting. Now I'm using a fully, let's call it, rigid, compressionless routing with this Avid Rolla Magic, which is no longer available. It's one of my most prized possessions. Anyway, let's run it through all the gears and you'll see the problem. I can't seem to be able to, well, adjust away. Here you go. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now let's go up the block. 1, and here's the problem. I don't seem to be able to adjust away, which suggests that the hanger here is bent, but the hanger here is new, so it's highly unlikely, and I don't have the tool to straighten the hanger, at least yet. I'm going to presuppose that I am, as I previously mentioned, well, I never make mistakes. This is a crack? No. I never make mistakes, thus this works like that, because it's kinda, you know, not really, well, high quality. I need to hold the pedal for a little bit in order to shift from 11 to 13. The rest of the gears works more or less correctly. Now the issue is that if I try to add tension using the barrel adjuster like this, maybe this will break in with time. I'm starting to get an incy-wincy bit of a rub on the higher gears. Now, this is pretty common on 12-speed drivetrains. They are very finicky to adjust, so I may be able to adjust this away with time, but I can say with confidence that this little thing wasn't the issue I was having. Anyway, let's go to conclusions. Let us conclude then like it's 1999. Number 1. 13-speed proved to be absolutely superfluous, and in comparison to 12-speed, if we take into consideration all the problems with installation, I don't think that the benefits are there. Now, let us consider that I was using it on a big enduro bike, and on that particular machine I would be perfectly happy with 2x9, 2x7 even, as long as it has a clutch and proper spread of gears or proper range. I don't need all that many gears on that particular caliber of a machine. However, if I were to use this on a gravel bike, on a cross-country bike, or even a road bike, this might have fared a little differently. Now, on a machine I intend to use it on, it's actually going to be a feature, but that's a song of the future. Number 2, cassette inertia. As I expected in the unboxing video, it is an issue considering the caliber of the bike I'm using it on, a bike that's essentially being used quite aggressively. It's very much of an issue, and in order to ameliorate that issue, I have actually bought a full chain guide, like from a downhill bike, because dropping a chain on a bike like this is not fun, and if you manage to drop a chain out of 38 tooth narrow wide chainring, you're doing something wrong. However, that is a problem with all those wide range heavy cassette using drivetrains with an unclutched derailleur. Essentially, you need a clutch in order to have something like that to work correctly and reliably. And lastly, number 3, the Sensah ARX plus the Sugek cassette plus the chain I bought, the entire bundle essentially delivers what it promises. And it works. In actual practice, riding the bike, all the little problems I showed you on the stand or on the hook aren't there. Shifts pretty well. You can always compensate for something. Maybe I'm just used to using janky bikes. I don't know. I don't have much to complain, with the exception of the inertial problems and a lack of clutch. It works. It's just not worth all the hassle. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the subject. In order not to ramble anymore, I'm going to end this video right now. If you're dedicated enough that you're watching or listening to this part of this video, I think I can safely, without feeling like an utter buffoon, recommend the channel, because apparently it helps with its growth, and just like most of you, I don't like when others do it, so I'm kind of at crossroads here. I'm going to do the deed and I'm going to shut up. So, recommend this video to others, so share it around, write a comment if you could, that helps apparently, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like this video, liking also apparently helps, disliking also helps I think, but don't do that, that makes me very sad. And I'm going to shut up because I said enough already.